This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock, joined by Representative Clarke Tucker, newly announced Democratic candidate for the 2nd Congressional District. Good to see you. Welcome back to the program.
Good to see you.
Congratulations to your entry here.
Thanks for having me, Roby.
Yeah,
I'm
excited.
Jumped
into the deep end of the pool there.
With both feet.
Let's talk about what pushed you into the race.
Well, healthcare is going to be at the top of the issues for me. And in the legislature, I worked on Arkansas Works. I know how important it is. It provides access to healthcare for over 300,000 Arkansans. And then I saw the House last year pass a bill that would have derailed Arkansas Works. It would have made it much more difficult for people with pre-existing conditions to have access to a doctor. And so that was heavy on my mind, and it always has been. Then last year, I was diagnosed with bladder cancer. And fortunately, I did have access to quality health care, and I beat it, and I'm cancer-free today, and that's the most important thing. But that just really brought that issue home for me. And I know I'm not the only one out there who faces that issue. And if Congress stays the same for the next couple years, there's a chance that they could take that protection away for people with pre-existing conditions. And I don't think that's right, and we deserve better.
What would you push for in terms of changes to healthcare policy at the federal level? Would you push for Medicare for all? Would you push for some sort of version of what Arkansas did with its private option plan? Would you look for fixes to the Affordable Care Act? How would you go about that?
Well, I think the Affordable Care Act, everyone agrees that it could have ways to be improved. It could be improved in some ways. And so, I think when we passed the Affordable Care Act, there were really two major issues with healthcare in the United States. One was accessibility and one was affordability. Ironically, the Affordable Care Act dealt more with accessibility than it did with affordability. And I think moving forward, we need to focus on affordability, both in terms of health insurance premiums and in terms of prescription drug costs. And that's the primary way to address healthcare moving forward, in my opinion.
What would be some of the specifics? What would you say would bring those pharmacy costs down? What would bring down the affordability costs?
It's some of the things that we've talked about in Arkansas. The healthcare system is set up right now to be incentivized for quantity of care rather than good outcomes. And I think you can adjust the system so that you actually are incentivizing positive outcomes, incentivizing providers, so everyone wins when people have good health outcomes, and that actually makes the system more efficient, it makes it more affordable, and it lowers costs for everybody.
Arkansas is doing something along those lines with its episodes of care,
right.
In terms of streamlining the system.
Independent assessments and just making sure that there's communication. Sometimes someone goes to the ER because they have an asthma attack. If there's someone paying attention and saying, we need to get this person, treatment for their asthma, then moving forward, they just have that inhaler and they don't go back to the emergency room once a month.
Right.
And that's just one example.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you probably would have opposed the Republican tax cut plan that passed late last year in Congress. What would be your position on tax cuts? Should we even have any tax cuts at this point with our national debt, with our deficit spending? Do you see a way to reform taxes?
I do. I supported tax cuts for the middle class in the Arkansas legislature, and I actually would have supported the portion of the tax cut bill that's targeted at individuals, particularly middle class Americans. But I'm very concerned about how we're going to pay for the rest of it. It adds $1.5 trillion to the debt. That's the primary estimate. And, the people who are benefiting from that smaller portion, the individual tax cut, they're going to be the ones to pay for the rest of it. And in fact, not just them and all of us, but our kids and our grandkids. Mm-hmm. So, I do have concerns about how much it adds to the national debt. We need to be responsible with our budget the same way we are in Arkansas state government. And then, I'm also concerned about going back to health care, to the portion of the tax cut bill that affected health care. And, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimates that 4 million people are going to be off of the healthcare system in 2019 as a result of that. And premiums could go up as much as 10% for people in parts of America. And so that's also very concerning to me because people may end up paying more in increased premiums than they get back from the tax cut.
You're going to get asked this question a lot, I think, on the campaign trail, especially if you win in May. If you're the Democratic nominee, are you going to support, if you're elected to Congress, are you going to support Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House?
I'll tell you, I'm frustrated with the leadership in both parties in Washington, D.C. and Congress right now. And I think we need to move in a different direction in both parties.
All right, let's take a quick commercial break with Clarke Tucker. He's running for the 2nd Congressional District as a Democrat. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about what some of your potential opponents in this race have said about you.
Sounds good.
I'm Roby Brock. We're back with more right after this.
Arkansas Electric Cooperative Corporation provides electric energy across 2/3 of Arkansas. This is an exciting time in our energy history, with incredible progress being made in renewable energy and storage technologies. As our energy portfolio continues to diversify, we'll maintain an all-the-above strategy to provide reliable and affordable electricity. Ever since the first light bulbs were placed in our members' homes, the electric cooperatives have been the solutions provider for our members, and we want to continue that well into the future.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America, moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.
I did.
Welcome back to Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock, joined by Representative Clarke Tucker. He's a newly announced Democratic candidate for the 2nd Congressional District. You got 2 other people who have announced in the Democratic primary here, Paul Spencer, Gwen Combs. They've been out longer than you organizing and carrying their message there. You're the 3rd one to get in the race. I want to read to you what Paul Spencer said about your entry into the race. I want to welcome State Representative Clarke Tucker into this race, reaffirm my belief that a vigorous policy-focused debate between competing campaigns is always healthy for our democracy. Do you think this primary will stay focused on policy?
I hope so. And I think that's a great statement by Paul. I have a good relationship with him, and he feels called to run the same way that I do. And I would hope that, I think all campaigns should do a better job of sticking to policy. So hopefully this primary election will stay that way.
Gwen Combs, also running for the Democratic nomination, said that your background is too similar to that of Congressman Hill's. She said voters are looking at the 2018 midterms as an opportunity to let candidates who understand what it's like to be an American who doesn't come from money or privilege. I am a candidate of the people for the people. How do you combat that criticism?
Well, I think all you have to do is look at my record in the legislature to see how I'm an advocate for the people. And I've worked across the aisle to get things done for all kinds of Arkansans on all kinds of issues, from paid maternity leave, increased access to pre-K, the tax cuts that I mentioned, enhanced public safety. And so I've really been an independent voice for, I think, the people of Arkansas, and I think that's a strong record, and it's a contrasting record, unlike what that comment mentions.
Congressman Hill also had a welcoming statement for you, too. He says the Democrats have a spirited primary ahead of them. I look forward to contrasting my record of lower taxes, smaller government, and a stronger economy against Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats' record of higher taxes, bigger government, and a weaker economy. Congressman French still there. How will you be different from Representative Hill based on what he said there?
Well, first of all, I think the history of the economy in the United States, particularly in the last couple of decades, has been the strongest under Democratic presidents and under Democratic leadership, and we've had the most economic growth. And so I would, probably have a different perspective than that last comment. But, I think the primary contrast is going to be on health care. And, the vote for the American Health Care Act is really started to get my attention, as I mentioned. And then with my personal situation and knowing how many hundreds of thousands of people across the state face that same situation, I think that's going to be a real contrasting position. But, I want to focus on the economy and jobs. I think, these are the kinds of issues that people care about that affect Arkansas families on a day-to-day basis. So healthcare, the economy, education, public safety, those are the kinds of issues I want to focus on.
Last question for you. There's one politician's name we haven't mentioned in this entire interview, President Donald Trump. Right. He has been a factor in a lot of congressional races that have in special elections, but he is certainly top of mind for a lot of Democrats in terms of predicting a potential wave election this time around. Where does Trump factor into your race?
Well, in a variety of ways. I mean, the one thing I would say is every president always factors into every midterm election, and that's been proven over the course of United States history. Another thing I would say is if I get the chance to go to Washington, then I do want to be an independent voice for the people of Central Arkansas, and I'll work with anybody who I think can do some good for us. And so I don't care if that's Republicans in Congress, Democrats in Congress, or the president. I think there's common ground on a lot of issues. And so, I think the people in Central Arkansas, for the most part, probably have their mind made up about the president. And I plan to focus on those issues that I mentioned that really affect them on a daily basis: healthcare, economic growth, education, and issues like that.
I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to ask you where you stand on some other positions.
Right.
Representative Clarke Tucker, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. It's good to see you as always.
Thank you, Robbie.
And thank you for tuning in. That's all for today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.